everyone, this is Group D, and we are here to share ideas on ending poverty from Goal 1 from SDG, to end this discussion in international flow.
To continue on, let's get deep into the table of contents. First, we'll talk about the definition of poverty, reasons of poverty, which is divided into economical and social reasons, and impacts of poverty, and MDGs and SDGs on ending poverty, and possible solutions, which is also divided into 3 levels, which is individual, governmental, and global. So, what is poverty? According to Oxford Dictionary, poverty is the state of being extremely poor, the state of being inferior in quality or insufficient in amount, and the renunciation of the right to individual ownership of property as part of a religious vow.
So what we have here is a reason of poverty, and we have characterized the reason into 3 parts: social and economical reason, and the other reason in the next slide. Firstly, in the social reasons, income is not equally distributed. That will cause the poverty. For example, let's say $500 paid worker and $300 paid worker, and let's pretend that they work the same amount of work and they go to the same company. Some people might say that it's only $200 differences, but if that amount of money goes on, that those 2 gap will be huge. So income inequality will cause the poverty. And moving on to the conflicts and unrest. Something interesting about conflicts that about 33% of communities in absolute poverty live in places of conflicts. For instance, in past, countries like Rwanda have suffered poverty due to civil wars and unrest. Unrest results in massive loss of human lives, diseases, starvation, and etc. Obviously, wealth can never be created in such an environment. Secondly, economical reasons. Many poor nations suffer a burden of loans and debts to international financial institutions. For example, in 1997, South Korea gone through financial government crisis, which they had to pay back to IMF, which stands for International Monetary Fund. But eventually, they withstood by citizens paying their own loans to the government to help them repay it to IMF. And unemployment is another economical reason that causes poverty, because of the lack of jobs. And there's the other reasons, includes the natural disaster and the disease and disabilities. Here, natural disasters such as droughts, floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, and other unexpected natural events cause death. For example, the flooding in Bangladesh, or the 2005 earthquake in Haiti, or earthquake and tsunami in Solomon Island in 2007. Especially the Solomon Island had lost 90% of their national budget due to this natural disaster. Poverty can also get worse if communities are affected with the disease, such as malaria and HIV/AIDS. Why? Because ill people cannot work. For example, in a normal family member, let's say father is ill, sick, then other family members have to replace the father's work and do more work. And what's the worst thing about this is that the ill people cannot work. And disability, there's a surprising fact that the incidence of poverty is 15% to 44% higher in households with disabled head or adult.
Okay, so in the book Writing of Famine, it mentions in terms a lot more people are into hunger in Asia than Africa. Asia has 550 million people with severe malnutrition, while only 170 million people in sub-Saharan Africa suffer from severe famine. So if you take a look at this map, there are much more darker shades in Africa than anywhere else. As we can see, shades in Africa, which translates to that Africa has much more higher poverty rate than in Asia. However, if we take a look in the population part, Asia has much more larger populations than Africa, which ultimately means that there are lots of humanity that suffers from poverty in Asia. But Africa is still poor and still gets support, but Asia doesn't really get support because not many knows that Asia is suffering from poverty. So these are reasons why we chose Asia as our range of our presentation.
Now let's take a look at the impacts of poverty. According to World Bank indicated 2008, almost half of the world, which is over 3 billion people, live on less than $2.5 a day. How about our next generations, the children? There are about 2.2 billion children around the world, almost 1 billion. The half of the total is suffering from poverty. And accordingly, 22,000 children die each day around the world. But the important thing is that this tragic situation continues over generations. Since Asia's 2010 poverty rate had already risen to nearly 50%, the poverty rate is still growing. Poverty is not the issue that can be solved by itself. Sadly, it has many branches. There was a study showing poverty leads to children's decrease of intellectual development. Since they have lost chance to be educated when they're young, it leads to social gap, which shows that poverty is a serious social issue. And this is why Goal 1, ending the poverty, has to be reached.
I'm going to talk about MDGs and SDGs and will add our personal views about it. MDGs stands for the Millennium Development Goals. There are 8 goals that were established in the year 2000. SDGs stands for Sustainable Development Goals, and there are 17 goals that are long-term aimed. SDGs appeared as a reinforced version of MDGs, thinking that no goals of MDGs were ever reached, which proved as a disappointment. The MDGs and the SDGs are quite different. MDGs just try to build up things, make things, and solve problems. However, SDGs focuses more on sustainable growth. They want to deal with the problem of poverty, but they focuses more on root problems and they're more inclusive. The main differences about MDGs and SDGs, poverty goals can be divided into 3 parts. First, 0 goals. MDGs are set to get us halfway, while SDGs are designed to finish the job. So we could say SDGs are 0 goals. Second, fundings. Unlike MDGs, SDGs want to make the countries self-economic sufficient, not only receiving the money that other countries or other people give. Lastly, distinguishment of hunger and poverty. The MDGs just combine hunger and poverty as one concept, but SDGs distinguish those 2 ideas to assist both areas effectively. Hunger mostly focuses on delivering nutrition, but poverty focuses on mostly economic status.